Larcy Lawrence McElroy here for Water Tiger School of Tai Chi Chuan. We're back. As we gave you a heads up the last video, we knew we were going to fall a little behind, so we're actually, I believe, 4 weeks out instead of our usual 3-week rotation. All things being equal, we should be back to the 3 weeks rotation for the time being, moving forward. So there's that. Today, we're supposed to be back in the Tai Chi side of the equation, but it's actually sort of a little blended thing that we're going to be doing today. It's the little things. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of moments. But first, the Thai shirt. It's a Singapore shirt. My Singapore dragon, front and back. My wife went to Singapore on business a number of years ago, came back with this t-shirt, among other things. And I like it. This is only the second time that I've worn this particular t-shirt in this entire sequence going all the way back to March of 2020. It was relatively early in the process. It was April 14th, 2020. It was actually a Facebook Live session. It was one of our Water Tiger for West Babylon, which we were doing while our West Babylon Public Library program was in suspension due to home isolation. I was focusing on one of our Bag of Fun exercises. So if you know Water Tiger School, you know we have this bag in the studio. We refer to it as the Bag of Fun. It has different stuff in it. And this one was binding, so tying yourself up as you're playing Tai Chi. So if you go back and watch it, again, it's Facebook Live. It's in that particular playlist. You're bound to have some fun. So there's that. We'll start with a warm-up here in a bit. It's going to be our last warm-up that we're pulling from our 10-piece T'ai Chi Qigong breathing set. There's still a couple of points or a couple of exercises in that 10-piece set, but we're not going to use the first one or the last one as a warm-up. It just doesn't make sense. The first one's kind of meditation, which we've done in the past, and the last one is a simple rock back and forth, which we might include in a warm-up at some point of several different things, but not just that alone. So anyway, this is left, right to push the mountains. It is in this set. It is the 8th piece, and it is pulled from the primary family of stationary Tai Chi Qigong. So we'll introduce that in a moment. I think I'll save the little things until after the warm-up. We'll talk a little bit more about the little things at that point. So notice the blue lines. These are going to be important as today's video goes by. And it's normally there when we're going to focus on shoulder width. So I guess I'm giving away some of the game. I'm going to finish my breath mint as we just do a little shake. So we always say the breathing set, and really our approach to both the primary and the coiling sets of stationary Tai Chi Qigong, that the exercises are really complexity wrapped in simplicity. There's not a lot to the movements, but there's a lot underneath the movements. I'm going to get a drink now that I've crunched my mint. For instance, in this one, there's a very subtle sense of that movement through the body. It's more or less a vertical orbit leading to movement out to the sides. Now, some caveats here. If you're more relaxed in the chest, back, and shoulders, we'll see how I am today. Yesterday was a chest and back day for me, so a little bit, my muscles are a little bit tight. No, I'm still okay, right? So you may choose, if you can keep your chest slightly sunk and your back slightly rounded, to have your mountains right out to your left and right. If that's not the case and that causes you to compress your back and extend your chest, then put the mountains angled slightly in front of you and to the sides. Now, a lot of people do call this left-right to push or touch mountains. We use the word push. Now, we understand that the underlying energy of push is penetrating, so driving through. It's really kind of a striking energy. But we chose push because I want to get beyond just that surface connection with the mountains. When we reach out, touching them seems to call up an image of just being on the surface. I'm not breaking apart the mountains, I'm not striking the mountains, but I want to feel as if we're having a little, coming to AWA moment or a Vulcan mountain mind meld thing going on as we go out side to side. So you want to get beyond the surface. There are some other details we'll talk about as we get into this. Breath and movement should be one. Again, that's part of our focus and our approach to Tai Chi Qigong. You want to maintain your sunken chest and rounded back throughout, your dropped or sunken shoulders, your dropped or sunken elbows throughout the play too. So, when you're coming back in, you don't want to drive your elbows. You don't have these Tyrannosaurus Rex arms. This is one of the times we wouldn't do that. You want to make sure that there's a switch from elbows coming in to elbows flaring out so you can maintain the sunken chest and rounded back, chin from parallel, slight tuck down. Right, well, we're going to be talking about that too as the video progresses. So chin from parallel, slight tuck down. That allows the crown point of the head. And this is Water Tiger School alignment. Crown point of the head, the Bak Wei point, up to the heavens, held, not lifted. Hu Yin, bottom of the sea, perineum, anchored toward the earth, not on the earth. Knees slightly open. Feet, shoulder wide and parallel. We define our shoulder width by where the drop of the shoulder is, kind of where you feel the bone drop down. Should split the heel on one side in half and the same on the other side. We'll start with the arms just hanging and take some breaths. Breathe and relax. Release. Allow things to flow. I was actually thinking about letting the girls down to join us today, but the youngest likes to pull up the tape. So maybe next time, because it's been a while since we've had the furries running around as additional entertainment in one of our videos. Find an aspect of the breath to float the hands. Now remember, when we say float at Water Tiger School, we don't mean lift up. We mean activate the wrists so the palms have that downward orientation. You'll notice as you activate the wrists, the compression on the top of the wrist, the extension on the bottom of the wrist will create a little bit of activation on up the arms, and the hands may come a little bit higher. But that's just because of the muscle and tendon and joint activation. A few breaths here with the palms downward. And find an exhale. And on an inhale, fingertips mostly forward. Some people do this and fingertips are in. And then ideally on an exhale, leading with the fingertips first, not starting with any aspect of the palm of the hand. Other people's will do that. And out. And notice on this out, I'm going to hold just for a moment so you can see, not overextending. And then in. Coming back to the center line, fingertips mostly open, ideally on an inhalation. And though we tell people, we give them a choice, I prefer the palms of the hands to begin the lead down on an exhale. Inhale up. Kind of feel the rise and how that rise then becomes an extension side to side. Exhale out. We're going to do 6. Inhale in. Exhale down. Just for variety, because we don't specify, we don't make, we don't insist on everyone leading with the heels of the palms down. On number 3 here, I'm going to allow the fingertips to drop first. But to me, feeling the structure of the moment, inhale in. Gravity seems to embrace the hands and the wrists here to pull the heels down, but you can govern that a little bit and manipulate to allow it to roll to the fingers. But to me, that's manipulation. Going to go back to my primary way on repetition 4. Inhale becomes exhale. And all these little details could be, considered the little things. Inhale in. Those aspects of our play in both Tai Chi and Qigong that seem to be little. And there again, I feel gravity embracing. I believe that was 4. I'm kind of chatting here, so also losing count. So we'll call this 5. It might be 6. Inhale. I like the aerodynamic, right? Some people would start with little more palm and then still sinking the wrists and pushing the palms outside to side. But we like that aerodynamic leading with the fingertips, sort of like you remember back in the day, depending upon when you were born. In the summer, the car windows would be open and you'd stick your hand out and you'd feel the air pressure, feel the wind leading with your fingertips, sort of like you were flying an airplane with your hands. Last one, inhale, fingertips mostly forward. Exhale, leading with the fingertips first. Inhale in. Exhale down. Left on the left, right on the right, fingertips mostly forward. Find that connection between the upper body and the lower body, also something that we'll be talking about here in a few moments. Inhale up, getting the vertical alignment over the right foot. In, bringing in that left foot. Down, pressing the heel down, redividing the weight equally between the 2 feet. And a little rebound. Brings the hands to a place over the acupuncture point for the Xia Danxian, the lower field of elixir. And there you go. There's the warm-up. So, the little things. I wanted to bring the actual book as I reference Wen Zhu. One of the little quotes, one of the little proverbs I have for you. This is a great book. It really helped me find a deeper connection to the philosophy of Taoism. Again, philosophy, not theology, not a religion. And the quote that we often use at Water Tiger School, we sort of bastardize a little bit because the actual quote is, to be a leader is like shooting an arrow. A tiny deviation at the outset results in a miss by a wide margin. We talk about that in terms of everything with your practice. So that small deviation as you're beginning something, as you're settling into a position, can result in you missing everything within whatever it is you're doing by a wide margin. So it's the little things. Some other proverbs, Chinese proverb, to move a big mountain, begin by removing the small stones. Napoleon Hill, quote from Napoleon Hill, if you cannot do great things, so if you're challenged by what it is that you're doing, do the small things in a great way, and they will lead you to the greater things. Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by doing a series of small things brought together. Water Tiger School also often gives nods to the ripples that are caused by throwing this tiny little pebble into a pond of water. Or, if you will, how does an avalanche start? It's not an explosion. It's not the big stone suddenly falling. It's the shift of a pebble. So it's the little things that are important. So we are going to address some of those little things that tend to slip by the side, if for no other reason. Another Water Tiger School point of view is that the 3 most dangerous words in your play in Tai Chi and Qigong are, I got this. We should never feel that way, right? So always be mindful, always focus, always be dedicated to doing what you're supposed to be doing instead of just sort of kind of doing what you think might be okay, if that makes sense. So starting, and you're probably, if you're in a different lineage, you're going to have different aspects of these things. But like for meditation, that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with our stance, our basic stance, our definition of shoulder wide, right? So if your definition of shoulder wide is inside the drop of the shoulder, then that's where you need to be, right? When you are in your classes, when you are on your mat or on your floor or in the park with your fellow students in your program, be where you're supposed to be. If you're inside of shoulder width, then there. Don't do mine unless you're practicing with me. If your definition of shoulder width is beyond shoulder width, that's where you need to be. If your lineage has a stationary meditation or positioning or starting position or anything with the feet abducted, say even at opening, that's where your feet should be. Ours are to be parallel in all those positions. So there's nothing more discouraging for an instructor than to look around as you're doing maybe a beginning of class meditation and having somebody stand in a group like this, and not because they have screws and plates and stuff in that ankle, forcing that toe out to that angle, but it's that they're not taking the time to go, oh, I need to be parallel or as close to parallel as possible. That's always a Water Tiger School caveat. We understand I have screws in that foot, and some days I can't have it parallel. I have a natural well, I wouldn't say natural because it's caused by the way that I relate to the accelerator and the brake pedals when I'm driving. But because of that play, normally if I'm just standing somewhere, my right foot is slightly kicked out. So if I'm not paying attention, it's going to go there. But if I'm paying attention, it's absolutely no strain for me to be parallel. So I want to make sure that I'm there, that I'm at my shoulder width as defined by your lineage, right? Some people will say, oh, it just feels better if I'm out here. Well, there's a reason within your lineage that your shoulder width is defined the way that it is. Now, some people are going to be squishier with maintaining that than other folks, but pay attention, right? Shoulder width, as close to parallel as possible. Stationary Qigong, meditation, etc. Maybe the one difference to that is, the standing 8 pieces brocade. There are variations. Our approach, Water Tiger School's approach to the standing 8 pieces brocade, have many of the pieces inside of shoulder width, and that's how we define it. Right? So if you're doing one of those pieces, double hands hold up the heavens, split between heaven and earth, bend and hold the bubbling well, etc., your feet should be inside of your shoulder width. If they're at your shoulder width, you're not doing it right. The wider stances, the lower stances, draw the bow to shoot the hawk, screw the fist with fiery eyes, normally outside of shoulder width, and because it is a squat, toes and knees facing the same direction because we go down lower, right? So if your knees are, if your ankles are more open, if your knees, then you're going to be knees forward, toes forward. If you're a little bit more open in this area, more the quad than ankles, anything else, your toes and your knees need to track the same direction. So you have those variations, again, depending upon your own lineage. So you pay attention to that. Shoulder wide is shoulder wide, right? The more time you spend here at whatever your basic stance, two-footed, really, stance where you're in meditation, waiting for something to happen, that sort of thing, that should be your default position. And the more time you spend there, if it's inside, outside, or right at the drip line of your shoulders, the easier it will be for you to recognize if it's right. The more time and attention you spend to familiarizing yourself with how that feels, the better off you'll be going, oh, yeah, I know, I just moved my foot a little bit. So I know that I moved my foot a little bit, but I can feel the difference between forward and out just by a matter of degrees, if I am listening to what's going on through my body. We should be able to identify these things, even though they are small, right? So vertical alignment. Again, that's going to be different from different perspectives. Our vertical alignment, as I outlined for left, right to push mountains, is feet shoulder wide and parallel, knees open. Perineum anchored toward the earth. What that does is it puts the hips underneath the torso underneath the shoulders. So I'm not doing this, though some people do, right? There are folks whose vertical alignment as they're playing, if they're in a stance, is going to have a slight lean forward, and others are going to create more of a pelvic tuck in this position based on their lineage, their purpose, their approach to the art. Some of you will say that, well, that's wrong. Some of you will say perineum anchored to the earth, crown point of the head held and not lifted to the heavens is wrong. It's different. It's not wrong, but you have to be aware of why your lineage does what it does, understand what those details are, and make sure that you are manifesting them. All right, so crown point of the head, base of the pelvic bowl, dead center between the feet. Hips underneath torso, torso underneath shoulders, chest sunk, back rounded. It's the back rounded for some people that gets them here, because they see back rounded and they see that phrase meaning a vertical rounding of the spine as opposed to the scapula sort of opening up like wings, right? Little relaxation underneath the arms. I've read many a time that people say the amount of space it takes to close your fist and put underneath your arms. Now I do that. Yeah, things kind of feel, shall we say, more open, but I have to hold my arms in that position. If I settle into my vertical alignment, according to Water Tiger School, and I sink my chest around my back, there's a little flare in the elbows, and that space between the armpit and the inside of the biceps and triceps on both sides releases a little bit. Doesn't really open up, right? If I'm in a relaxed state, if I'm in a tense state, then it may have a little bit more space, but it's just open. Chin from parallel, slight tuck down. This is another one that goes away. We can be in meditation, and what the tendency is in meditation is for the chin to start floating up. Usually that's the case when you're standing. If you're doing a seated meditation, a lot of times the tendency is for the chin to drop down below that slight tuck. But it's that slight tuck, just that little bit. I'm going from more or less chin parallel and eyes looking right straight out to now I can feel the need to just raise the focus of my eyes so that I'm picking a point at this point that's parallel. Here, the point is higher. Here, point is just a little bit below that because my head is tilted and I'm raising my focal point of my sight up a little bit. And that's where it should be, and that's where it should stay. And ideally, it should stay as we're playing, with some exceptions, depending upon the various postures that we're doing. But again, you don't want to be in white crane and open like that unless that's your approach in your lineage, right? So what is it? What is your structure supposed to be as you're playing through what it is that you're playing? That's our vertical alignment, right? When we close, when we open, one of our focuses at Water Tiger School is always sort of the practical side of if part of me moves, all of me moves. If part of me is still, all of me is still. Now, granted, when we do the opening and close, it's a little squishy at times. But this gives you an opportunity to really find that connection between the upper body and the lower body, which then you can explore if you follow the same sort of point of view as Water Tiger School, as you're playing your forms, that everything is either moving or nothing is moving. So for instance, when we closed last left, right to push mountains. I sort of did the verbal, I didn't specify, but ideally these 2 points, crown point of the head, base of the pelvic bowl, and settling all the weight into the right foot. All of that should be in place at this point. As your hands reach the arc, the highest arc of up and out. Not before, not after, but at the same time. Then this distance, bringing that foot in, should be done as the hands roll as if on top of a beach ball over the top of that ball and coming in to the ball of that foot. Now, at this point, normally we talk about how once you set a height in your Tai Chi, you should maintain that throughout, unless you're doing something like snake creeps down, then of course you're going to go lower, right? But here, when we're closing, we deviate from that in one or two ways. As I'm pressing down, I can lengthen the body to drop the heel. Here's the deviation from if part, then all. And that's the heel touches down whenever it touches down. But I can feel at that point, as soon as it comes into contact, the body is settling then between the 2 feet, and that is finished as the downward motion is finished. And now, since I've pressed down and lengthened, I have some movement left over. I have some movement left over. I have some movement left over to bring the hands over the acupuncture point for the Xia Dantian. And the little difference there is I can come in, again, up and out. I have my 3 points. In, the foot comes in. To lower the heel, I sink down. And then I rise back up. And boom. And there you go. Again, little things, very important. So that's going to bring us to stance structure. And again, it's going to be different for different people, and sometimes it's different because of the postures. But generally, for Water Tiger School, we are in a shoulder-wide stance, which is defined by where the heels are. So if you've been with us since the beginning, here you go. Say the words with me. Turn out on the heel, not turn the heel in on the ball of the foot. Now my heels are closer than shoulder wide. So I'm going to pivot on that heel, right heel. I'm going to end up in what we refer to as a left four stance at Water Tiger School. My right foot is somewhere around a 45. Again, we can be squishy with that. 45 is ideal, but some people do have, flexibility issues, metal in there, ankle injuries, that sort of thing, and they can't do the 45. Some people actually feel a little bit more comfortable outside of the 45. I think they're a little weird, but that's me. And then the other foot slightly forward. Now, front toes forward for us. Or they could come in, right? We allow for that. We just don't want to be, when we finalize our shoulder width stance, we don't want the toes to be out, because in that position with our hips square, because that's what we do, it puts too much strain, shearing pressure on the knee, right? But my hips should be square, right? If I'm moving into what we refer to as a left four stance, some people call it a right four stance because to get into it, you start in the right and you step left, so it's a right four stance. To us, we finish in the left, so it's a left four stance. I thought about getting into the weeds of language as we were putting together this, and it's yeah, let's just maybe mention it and then back away from it. But here, I still want to maintain chin from parallel, slight tuck down, so I'm not here, definitely not here, not looking down. As the man said in Molly's Game, the movie, you look down, that's where you're going to go. Right, so knee over ankle, safest, knee over top of the foot for us, okay. But the hips are square. That means my left hip is pulling back. My right hip is pulling forward. So if I'm looking to the right side of my space, if that's the direction I'm facing in my left four stance, my hip should be straight to the camera, straight to the back wall. Not here, right? My back hip is not open. I want to make sure that it's closed and forward. For us, we've got about 60, 70%, ideally 70% on the front leg, 30, 40% of the weight on the back leg. I feel driving down and driving up in both. Right? For us, different than other people, movement begins at the Xia Dan Tian and spreads in the two directions. For some of you, it's pushing down on that foot, coming up through the center, stabilizing with that foot coming up through the center and having that connection to the earth spread out through the upper body. Makes sense? Not what we do at Water Tiger School. Boom. To make sure it doesn't matter, I don't feel anyway, it doesn't matter which of those approaches you use, you want to make sure. Another little thing that happens, we roll to the inside of the instep and we have space here. We want to eliminate that space. But again, the hips are square. Bak Wei, oops, that's the one up here. Hu Yin is the one down here. Bak Wei over the Hu Yin. And those 2 points really, if you're probably to do the math, you can see that those 2 upper points dropped all the way to the floor are on a line between ball of the back foot, ball of the front foot. Not 50-50. Forward moving stance. And the right stance, much the same. Again, got some metal in there. We've got some rain moving around our vicinity in the northeast. So we'll see if that back foot is at the 45. I think it is. It might be a little bit shallow. Yeah, it's a little bit shallow. I let it do what it needs to do, right? But again, squaring off the hips in this case means my right hip is pulling back, my left hip is turning forward. Right toes straight toward the camera. And here, since I'm facing the camera instead of facing the right or the left, nose, right straight forward. Center of chest, right straight forward. Spine, right straight back. Right hip, this is my right hip, right side of the room, left side. So as we've talked about before, if I'm in 4 stance, I've made what could be considered a plus sign because my center line is right straight forward and back. My hips and my shoulders are right straight left and right. So that creates a plus sign. As I'm starting to move into the stance, I'm actually an X or multiplication sign because hips and shoulders at this 45, center line at this 45, and boom, and forward. Making sure they have that hip rotation. Now, some of you, especially those who might be inside of shoulder width, your end of posture will have a slightly or dramatically open back hip inside of our definition of shoulder wide, right? And we're actually in that position in single whip. We sort of refer to our single whip stance as sort of a Tai Chi version of a T stance, which is this, right? Where the heel lines up with the instep. But our back foot is outside of alignment of the front foot. But in our single whip stance, our hips are angled as we're in our whip position. And we're not trying to square off here. Some people will be in their single whip, will be shoulder wide, and will be square or more square-ish than we are at Water Tiger School. Again, make sure you understand what your position should be as you're playing your various postures. And finally, not really finally, because we're going to do a little bit of an exercise addressing sort of all of those points here in a couple of moments. But what is your head and eye orientation in your lineage? We emphasize at Water Tiger School how it really sort of, we refer to it as, in a way, following what might be considered the primary hand, which can cause issues because we also, our approach to Tai Chi is really Tai Chi as a martial art, though most of our students tend to be there for balance, coordination, health benefits, that sort of thing. So we sort of back away from that. But we do teach from a martial perspective. We're always talking about the shadow opponent. And what tends to happen to people when they hear that is they think, oh, you know, every fight that I've ever seen on television or anything, or maybe a conflict in which I have been involved, my eyes are always on my opponent because you don't want to take your eyes off your opponent. So everything they do, from parting wild horse's mane to brush knee step, and I'm abbreviating and strike, is all right straightforward. Not for water tiger school, right? So if we take that into the realm of the little demonstration that I just did, again, very casual approach to the postures. Probably shouldn't do that. I often tell my students not to do that. But if I'm going into parting the wild horse's mane, there are plenty of opportunities to go back in the video collection for Water Tiger School and look at the details of parting the wild horse's mane. But here I am. I know my opponent is really there. I mean, this hand at the top is blocking a punch and driving it down, and I'm moving and striking up underneath. So I know my opponent is there, but my eyes are over this direction. Now, there are generally sort of four, I suppose, 3 or 4 different versions of what the head and eye orientation is. I've given one, right straight forward all the time. Always eyes on the opponent. 2, regardless of what you're doing, this nose should be perpendicular to these shoulders. So I'm not turning my head any more than allowing my nose to be perpendicular to my shoulders. So maybe I'm doing parting the wild horse's mane here, and then there, and there, and there, and not adding that extra twist to it. So perpendicular. There is the floating head. So it may, turn a little bit, right? For us, again, we sort of focus on that, if you will, what changes into the primary hand. I really hate using primary and secondary hands, because that gives you the illusion, that gives you the idea, it sort of strikes a chord that says, oh, that's your important hand. Everything's important. Head, toes, to fingertips and thumb tips, everything, whole body, important, 100% of the time, right? But right here, this becomes, shall we say, the primary hand. And then as I turn forward, it becomes this one. Back, sort of neutral, so the head floats. So we sort of do a combination at Water Tiger School of everything. If I'm doing brush, knee, step, and strike, or brush, knee, step, or brush, knee, strike, whatever you may call it, simply brush, knee, I'm actually looking all the way back here at that hand that has been used to block and sweep, and then stepping in this spread, and then following that hand into its strike. Again, this may look weird to some of you if you haven't seen any of our foci on brush, knee, step, and strike. Most people do it out here. We feel that we've blocked and pulled our opponent into such a position, that's where the target is. Regardless, you can see I'm not doing this. I'm looking at that left hand obliquely over the left shoulder. Really, I should do that a little bit better, because as that foot releases for us, the hand releases. Brush, knee, step, and moving into the strike. So eyes, nose, head. How is it supposed to move as you play? You should do what your lineage's approach is, right? Or work out, and some lineages are pretty, squishy. It's like a lot of, there are plenty of instructors out there. That's not a particular focus for them. It's like, get the other things right. That can be what works for you. Right? And we do that on some things too. So the little exercise, there are 4 postures we weave together, and I think most people probably in one of their forms weave the 4 postures together. We call the 4 postures together grasp sparrow's tail. Some people, what we call ward off, the first posture is grasp sparrow's tail or hold bird's tail or grab bird's tail or something, and then you have roll back, press, push. Right? So it gives you an opportunity sort of just quickly to explore some of these things and some other things, but like the squaring off of the hips. As you move into ward off, it's an underhand block for us and a press back, pressing them back, right? Not really striking them back, but pressing them back. And the tendency is for that then to just become this forward movement. But if you square off the hips, then that left hip in a left 4 stance pulling back is what settles, what creates that extension, that snap of the whip in that ward off arm. And the right hip moving forward with the left hip moving back is what creates that sort of, for us, an underhand pitch sort of movement into that follow through into the crook of the arm. And sort of the same as we were in Parting the Wild Horse's Mane. I'm here. I've got more weight on the back foot than the front foot. Maybe I'll bring the toes up off. Back foot is, let me make sure everything's in the right spot for, for camera. So I'm on camera. Boom. Right, so I'm here. I know my opponent is there. The punch is coming in over there. But then I turn forward, squaring off the hips, feeling that. Right? And then little pulse creates that change and roll back. And notice the turn forward, everything is there at once, everything changes at once. And it is not me throwing the arms out, it is not me pulling the arms in. And when I'm coming back, I still have that head, nose following the active hand, but I'm not looking down at it. I am looking that direction, right? And in the 24, create that little, and the long form, create that little roll, turning forward. Feel that left hip pulling back, creating the pulling back, the pressing back of the arm in front. We talk about this squeeze, and a lot of people think, gotta squeeze, right? But as you're moving into that position, this left hip moving back pulls that in, creates the roundness, creates the stability. The right hip moving forward, knife edge of the hand in the crook of the wrist. And again, some people put palm to palm. Some people do pads of fingers to palm, all sorts of different positions. We're knife edge of the backhand into the crook of the forward wrist. And again, my right hip turning forward, I don't get that. That right hip is back. But if I'm square, notice what you can see, right? The right cheek there goes away if I'm squaring off the hips. And sitting back, maybe bringing the ball of the foot up with me, there's that separation. We refer to this sometimes as zombie defense, because somebody's coming at me, and I'm sitting back, drawing them in closer, and then moving forward. And again, there could be a tendency here for that back hip to be open. I want to feel, and it's interesting if you can really identify how both hands are moving, both hands are striking, both hands are pushing energy through the opponent at this moment. But one is being driven, the hip is turning forward, and the other is extending with the same intensity because the other hip is turning back. And if they're out of balance, then one of them or both of them will die, as far as they won't have the activation that's necessary. Boom. And that's push. And that's square, shoulders over the torso, over the hips, perineum, Hu Yin, anchored to the earth, crown point of the head. I'm in my 70-30 position. The outside of my back instep is down. My chin from parallel is slight tuck down as I move from forming the ball to ward off, to roll back, to press, to setting back, and push, to going back to hold the ball, form the ball really, forward into ward off, squaring off the hips, turning. And again, that turn, that shift. Something else I want to make sure of here is that I'm not stopping, moving the arms and coming back, but that weight bounces into and out of that leg without a stop. It bounces into and out of that leg without a stop. One more on this side. Ward off, roll back, press, and push. And a little casual closing. Doing my best to explore getting everything moving together at the same time as I do a casual version of our closing that we started with earlier. So we'll do that to the other side, kind of balance the sides a little bit, and call it a video. I'm hoping that all this makes some sort of sense. I've been doing the best I can to point out that everybody does this stuff differently. Another Water Tiger School perspective, as we have said many times here, diversity in the arts are our greatest strength. It's not a weakness. Everybody's different. We all look at the principles from our own perspective. My favorite image and sort of a standard for Water Tiger School is a spiral staircase. We're all in the spiral staircase, different heights, different positions, seeing that core of the staircase from our own perspective. So again, for us, this is a right four stance because, again, it's a left four stance for some because the weight starts in the left, you step into the right. But for us, because we end with the right, this is a right four stance. So for us, this is a right grasp sparrow's tail. Four postures together is the way that we reference grasp sparrow's tail. Rocking back, maybe bringing the ball of the foot with. That way too, I get to sort of play with, explore, making sure those toes land forward. Checking on that rear instep so I'm not rolling to it. Roll back, not looking down, and allowing that movement to draw the hands in. Turning forward, press, sitting back, push. Left hip driving forward, driving the left hand, right hip turning back, driving the right hand. Same intensity between the two that goes away if my hips are not square. Back, breathing, sunken chest, rounded back, roll back, press, right hip turning back, drawing that right arm in, left hip turning forward, pressing the knife edge of the left wrist, left hand, into the crook, the fold of the right wrist, bouncing back. Again, not holding the weight, not stopping, moving the arms, and then shifting forward, but bouncing the weight in and out, connecting the movement through the body. Same thing here in this sort of rocking exercise. I want to bounce the weight back and then bounce it forward And then once everything's forward, it bounces into back. It's actually sort of the essence of ward off energy. It's rebounding or bouncing energy. Not holding the weight there, moving the arms, having that bounce, move the hands and the arms through the body. One more time. So, I would ask you, if you would like, if there are little things that come to mind that you think should have been in this video, then share them in the comments below. And perhaps we'll do a second edition of It's the Little Things. And as always with the comments, we are still checking them before we allow them to be posted. Really, the only thing we expect to ever not share, because we know you're all nice. You won't flame us, because we won't allow that either. But we also don't need to be advertising people's, shall we say, dating links. And as we say at the end of every one of our videos, the YouTube algorithms just don't seem to catch those and pull them off. So we do look at all of the comments. Not that we really ever get any, but I'm asking you, if you have any little things, post them in the comments below. Trying to think if there's anything else I really need to mention. Not really. Air quality these days, pretty good. New variations of the novel coronavirus, so we still have to be careful out there. So there's that. And we'll be back in, should be in 3 weeks. We'll be back to purely a Qigong focus. And we're getting close to the end of the animal frolics. We only have 2 animals left, 2 specific animal frolics left. One for the bear and one for the deer. I think we recently finished monkey. No, the bear is done. Bear's done. We have one for the deer, one for the monkey. It's not in my cue cards, so I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll be back for that. And as always, it's the same warm-up for the animal frolics we always do from the 9 temple exercises, advance and retreat. But that should be sometime in 3 weeks. Till then, thanks for your time and attention. Always appreciate it. Hope you found this, vaguely entertaining, slightly informative, maybe made you think about some things, like letting go of those 3 words, I got this. None of us at any point have ever got this. If you ask me, it's my opinion. I won't say it's humble, but it's my opinion. So there you go. And again, we will post a link to this on our Facebook page, which again has a little bit, less admin in place than YouTube, but same thing. If things are inappropriate, we will delete them and block the person who posted them. So, take care. Appreciate it. Ta.